Gottfried Bokwing, Professor of Finance and Economist. He's at the University of Ghana. Dr. Stephen Amwa is MP in Shaiso and MP in Shaiso and member Finance Committee of Parliament. Here in the studio is Samuel Okudzeto Ablakwa, MP, North Tongue and ranking member Foreign Affairs Committee of Parliament. We also have Bright Simmons, Honorary Vice President, Imani Africa, joining us, as well as Dr. Paul Opoku-Mensah, Executive Director, National Cathedral Secretariat. So let's begin to look at the issues of bread and butter. Of course, all the issues must be about bread and butter, but it's become very obvious that the twin, world global issues of the pandemic, coronavirus pandemic, and the Ukraine-Russian war is beginning to further devastate and even destroy economies, particularly those that appear not to have been in the best of shape at the beginning of the pandemic. So, inflation, as we understand now, has jumped to 27.6% from the 23.6% recorded in April 2022. According to recent figures from the Ghana Statistical Service, this has been blamed on the increase in transport fares and food prices. According to the government statistician, Professor Kobna Enim, the rate of inflation for transport is at 39.0%, household equipment and maintenance 33.8%, housing, water, gas, electricity 32.3%, food and non-alcoholic beverages 30.3.16% were higher than the national average 27.6%. And in May 2022, 12 of the 13 divisions recorded inflation rates higher than the rolling average from June 2021 to May 2022. Now, as we know, the floods have also been devastating the country, not only in Accra. Outside Accra, it's not been the best. So let's begin to ask the question, as fuel prices are going up even further, what is life going to be like in the coming weeks, days, months? And will this be reversed anytime soon? First, Okudzeto is with us in the studio, so let's have your view of how you appreciate the way things are going now, as far as inflation is concerned.
Well, thank you very much, Samson. Good morning to you, to the panel, and to all our distinguished viewers and listeners across the globe. Difficult times, isn't it? I mean, these are really, really tough times. As a member of parliament, anytime you go to the constituency, anytime you pick your phone, you just have no choice but to really feel for your constituents and feel for the people, people who not too long ago were very comfortable, and will assist even with other social interventions that you are carrying out in your constituency. They are all reeling now, and savings have run dry. You have a situation where salaries no longer take people home. I mean, a friend was doing an analysis with me a few days ago about how the cost of fuel alone at the end of the month consumes the entire, salary that he earns. And so he's even wondering if he shouldn't park his vehicle. So everybody can feel the bite. And you look at the stats, and they are not getting any better. This is the worst inflation number in over 2 decades, we are told. And prices of goods and services are up. Everything is going up, except salaries. I was looking at some analysis that Metro TV did yesterday. I was on the set, and they were comparing Ghana with some 14 other countries, and our minimum wage is amongst the lowest. I think it was only Gambia and Ethiopia that had a better minimum wage than us, and yet we have the worst inflation, and yet our fuel prices are the highest, on the continent. So we are really in particularly excruciating times, and something must be done, particularly with the cost of fuel. The impression has been created that these are matters that are out of the hands of those who run the economy. I disagree. There are 3 factors when you look at the fuel pricing. You have the world market prices,
right.
Then you have the taxes and levies, and then the third component, it's the exchange rate. So the exchange rate is within our capacity. The managers of the economy who had professed some superior, managerial abilities must bring that to bear and rein in the depreciating currency. Then you come to the taxes and levies, Samson. It's atrocious that we are keeping these 12 taxes and levies. And the last time we did an analysis in Parliament, it was amounting to almost 40% of the price buildup, what you pay at the pump. Energy debt recovery levy, road fund, energy fund levy, price stabilization recovery levy, sanitation and pollution levy, energy sector recovery levy, special petroleum tax, primary distribution margin, bust margin, fuel market margin, marketers margin, dealers, retailers and operators margin. 12 taxes and levies, 40% of the price buildup. This is where something can be done. This week we filed a question in Parliament. The Deputy Energy Minister re-echoed what the President told workers on May Day, that they are not in a position to do something about the taxes and levies. We disagree. We are appealing to government. And you see, it's about addressing the expenditure side of things. Government expenditure is still too high. I have been tracking these matters, as you know, in Parliament. And when you see the things that government is spending on, you see what government priority is. You see the size of government. Look, I was comparing President Mahamad's report to Parliament on his 2015, and that's the last report we received from President Mahama on his staffing situation at the office of the President. He had 5 ministers of state at Appendix A, Appendix B, list of presidential staffers. He had 26 at page 4. I can share them with you. So in all political appointees, he had 31, the record in Parliament. You compare with the current situation, the latest we have from President Akufo-Addo, political appointees, he has 337. So we've moved from 31 to 337. All of these have fiscal implications. So when people say that, how do you expect government to manage if you reduce the taxes? Already we have challenges with meeting government expenditure. Let's go into the expenditure. What are those items we are spending on? Are they necessary? Is that a priority? We'll be coming to the National Cathedral. At this time, should we be continuing with that? I have seen other projects in the budget. For example, I keep talking about the Accra International Conference Center. They want to raise it down, build a new one at 165 million euros. Only this week, they were asking for approval for more loans, about $1 billion, dollars, which we had to, stop in Parliament. So the expenditure side of things must be looked at. Then my final preliminary comment relates to the creative cushioning, social safety nets that we can provide. If you study what other countries are doing, yes, this is a global phenomenon, but countries that are exhibiting superior management of the economy, that are exhibiting more creative thinking, are cushioning their citizens. You go to Hungary, for example, they have creatively placed a cap on all staples, on fuel prices. It cannot go beyond a certain point. And they are subsidizing. You may call it price control.
Yeah.
But it's helping their people and it's cushioning their people. You go to the United Kingdom, they've identified the data is there, they've identified the vulnerable, and they are providing, cash grants to them, to households, between 500 to 2,000 pounds a week, supporting them. So there are examples all over the place about how governments are cushioning, their citizens. In Ghana, it does appear that it was just because the 2020 elections was ahead of us, so we found a way of doing the, free electricity, free water, and offering some food stamps here and there. Once the election was over, that's it. We just rather impose more taxes. So we should be looking at serious cushioning. And what is making this situation even worse is that all of the traditional safety nets that could have even helped ameliorate the plight of the people are all in arrears. LEAP is not really going. Government has not supported LEAP in a long time. You take NAPCO. NAPCO has not been paid for about 8 to 9 months now. So the traditional safety nets are all struggling. Health insurance is in crisis. It's owed over 2 billion cedis. So we have to be careful. You see, this is now an existential threat for this democracy. See what happened in Sri Lanka. The economic crisis we are faced with now has shown that if you do not manage the situation well and you don't step in and offer the people some reprieve, it can undermine your democratic stability, and the people can just rise up, say enough is enough, and just topple the leadership, and that's the end of your democracy. So yes, I see government all over the place about some terrorists coming from outside, some imminent threat and all of that. I think that they should rather pay attention to the current economic crisis, the excruciating hardships, the torture economically that the people are going through. It's just unsustainable. So government should look at the expenditure side of things, reduce expenditure drastically, cut down on all of these prestige projects. They can hold on, and let's channel our resources into cushioning the people. Okay. As for the taxes and levies, these 12 taxes and levies on the petroleum price buildup, there is absolutely no justification to keep them, in these really, really tough times. Okay,
and we had some rather lengthy discussions on these taxes that form 40% of the price buildup. Sometime in 2021, we are back to this discussion again. I'm looking at the Ghana Business News, Emmanuel Dogbovi's Ghana Business News, and the headline on November 29, 2021 was, "You pay so much for fuel in Ghana because 40% of price is taxes," and they give the full list. I thought we promised to do something about it. There was a promise to do something about it, but still we are there. Professor Bokpin, and please, viewers and listeners, share with us how you are coping. Share with us how you are coping. Hashtag Newsfile. Those of you normally sending us messages by Twitter, also post them and we'll share them with the rest of the world. How are you coping in the ever rising cost of living? Goods, prices of goods are just rising. Will they even ever come down? The cost of living in Ghana is getting unbearable, with prices of goods and services increasing by over 26% on the national inflation average. Yes, Professor Bokwing, what will be your first commentary, and embedded in that, how should the state look to resolving these issues? We have discussed this in the course of the year, and you guys asked for certain measures to be taken, tightening of the belt, so to speak. The president or the finance minister brought out some measures, including stopping unnecessary travels unless they are statutorily required, taking a pay cut, among other things.
Good morning, Samson.
Good morning.
Good morning to our cherished viewers and listeners across the globe, and good morning to my colleague panelists. Samson, it's interesting. Probably the reason why in this country revising your lecture notes means less, because we never really get to address anything structural, meaningful, impactful. I'm sure if we look back so many decades back, you will see these headlines, whether it's flood, whether it's inflation, you will see it. In fact, particularly for Ghana, since we assumed the reign of this country, both in terms of political, physical, monetary, we've never been able to tame inflation. Inflation in 1964 was 0.98%, something. By the end of 1965, inflation had jumped from 0.98% to 26.4%. Look at that within that short period. Over the years, we've gone through structural reforms, even across fiscal side, monetary side, we have struggled. And that is just a symptom of the many aspects of our lives where Ghana has failed. And we are almost heading to the point where we will say Ghana is becoming a failed state. I do recognize that we've made considerable progress since independence. Yes, we can celebrate that. There is so much that we could have done, that we could do, that makes all this discussion in the midst of the abundant resources, human capital that we have. And if you look, to make matters simple and probably understandable, you want to look at the household expenditure disaggregation. And then you look at the drivers of inflation. Samson, you will realize that the average Ghanaian spends the household expenditure on food alone, the data available is around 42.9% on food. So when you see food inflation rising the way we have seen by the data, that is quite worrying, because it tells you the concentration of household expenditure and the impact. Then you want to look at housing, you want to look at transportation, and the rest of them. That said, then you want to look at the layers of taxes. Heavily indirect tax handles. And we have said that there is no way you could guarantee private sector leadership in your economic transformation drive with these burdens on ordinary Ghanaians and the private sector. Samson, if you're an average worker in Ghana and you look at the proportion of your expenditure on food, rent, transportation, and the rest of them, it's practically very difficult to save. You can understand why our savings rate in this country is very low, whilst our investment requirement is high. That gap will then tend to liberalize the environment and make it so conducive to foreign investors to fill the gap in order to realize our economic dream underpinned by the strategy. When it happens that way, it's going to be difficult for the average Ghanaian to actually make significant savings in order to take advantage of even the limited economic opportunity available. When you do the effective tax burden on the average Ghanaian, you look at, you are in the top end, you pay 25%, assuming you spend 60% of your disposable income on consumption, you look at the layers of taxes. VAT, 12.5%, GET Fund, NHL, this, COVID levy, this levy, that levy, and you put everything together, you are hitting in excess of 60%. When you look at all these things, there is no breathing space for the average Ghanaian. It gets worse for those who are on pension and their livelihood is on the strength of the law from SNIT and maybe latter generation tier 2. Because they are on fixed pension and they are impacted much more. Remember, not every Ghanaian who retires at the age of 60 gets ex gratia, regardless of how you describe it and justify it. But the average teacher who teaches for 30 years, he goes home with practically nothing. And I'll share something with you. When I went to my village and I saw this man walking by the road, and he actually was stopping my car. I was wondering where he got that boldness from. When I stopped something, this was my teacher in JSS 1. JSS 1. In fact, when I went to JSS, there were only 2 teachers. So those of us in JSS 1, there was no one taking care of us because they had to handle JSS 2 and then JSS 3. I went to JSS, my biggest problem was how to read. Of course, typical from Ashanti region where they use tree to explain adverb. This man told me he had gone on pension. And when he mentioned the amount to me, I almost wept. The little I could do immediately was to give the malt I was going to take to him and ask him to join me in my car. This is somebody who has labored for over 30 years. Maybe this was just by the way. Does it look like we are getting out of this now? The answer is no. The reason I'm saying so, Samson, is that we have austerity staring on our face. And physical consolidation, either we do it under an IMF program or the measures we impose on ourselves, tells you that the fiscal consolidation we are implementing requires some adjustment costs that will be borne by the citizens, oftentimes unevenly distributed, heavily against the poor, marginalized, socially excluded. The inflation you are talking about, 27.6%, something. Yours may be higher than that. Mine could be lower than that, just as an example.
Yeah.
Because it varies from region to region, it varies from district to district, it varies from an individual to another individual, because your consumption pattern will have a different inflation from my consumption pattern, from the Honorable Samuel Okujeto, and so it varies. Somebody's own could be probably in the 40s. But of course, because we are actually not taking the survey from all the markets, how about the online shopping market and the rest of them? This is how challenging it is. To put matters within perspective, you want to look at this within our peers, and I think you mentioned that, which is very useful. The only caveat is that for Francophone countries, the comparison may not be that straightforward because the pass-through of exchange rate to inflation may be a bit mute for them compared to Ghana, because they use the Francophone CFA akin to the euro, so the depreciation is not that strong as compared to Ghana that operates flexible, managed flexible exchange rate mechanism. But of course, you can compare Ghana to Kenya, you can compare Ghana to Nigeria and other countries. And then you see the variation in the price build-up. When you put all these things together, it will be unique to outsource all of this to just external factors. When COVID came, we did analysis and we said that, in fact, food food nutrition started deteriorating from Ghana and West Africa broadly from 2014. You can check the data. The conclusion was that Africa, Ghana for that matter, must prioritize agricultural spending. Okay, link that to agribusiness and industrialization as an effective response to COVID-19, because it was just a matter of time, and hunger, food malnutrition will kill more people than the virus itself. Of course, our president told us that we should eat kontomire and other things. Maybe that was the time we should have started planting more kontomire. How do you eat it when it is not available? So far, the best feedback for government flagship program is what we are discussing right now. Planting for food and jobs. Samson, where is the food and where are the jobs? It is factors and drivers like this that reveals the resilience of your policy and your economy. So when macro global level, the impact is pervasive. We are not here to deny that. But the resilience of your economy is shown in times like this. And that is why you see variations in the level of exposure and price development between Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria, Kenya, and other countries. You see, when it happens that way, then you realize how global level development is actually meeting local reality and magnifies the vulnerabilities that we have used words to explain. But now, your words against the reality, now it's no longer a multiple choice, so that people choose what they like. But the reality is in front of everyone, regardless of your political affiliation.
Prof, given that we have a debt burden that is swallowing us, so to speak, do you see that we will get out of this situation anytime soon, and how?
Yes, Samson, we are not getting out of this anytime soon. And that is not to make Ghanaians sad. The reason we are saying so, you are looking at the current measures embedded in the 2022 budget and the enhanced measures, and then you can do the forecast and the prediction, both in terms of your debt sustainability drive and then many other things. And Samson, it doesn't look that good. You know what? We don't need to be diplomatic about this, because the real effect of that can never be explained through jargons. Let me put it this way. See, if you look at the budget right now, and even the enhanced budgets, there is practically no space for growth enhancing spending that would inure to the common good. It doesn't. Look, and the problem should never be and can never be solely because we are not generating a lot of revenue, but it has more to do with expenditure. And I like it when the Honorable in the studio gave the statistics, right? They are in Parliament. Of course, they should help us perform that kind of check and the rest of them effectively. We've seen this across the two main political parties, so we can talk about them objectively, okay? We can share the guilt and all of the proportionately or disproportionately in whatever form. But that's where we find ourselves. But here is the government saying they are not going for an IMF program or whatever. But the point, Samson, is that there is no program right now from the side of government that we can put side by side with an IMF program that says that this is far better with trackable objectives underpinned by certain reforms, and see whether government has a political will to impose that necessary fiscal discipline on itself. The lack of transparency and disclosure, even with the enhanced measures that government announced and all of that, itself doesn't help market confidence. When was the last time we received an update from the Ministry of Finance on all those enhanced measures? And the savings to be accumulated from there, where are they? How are they being applied? Where are we now, middle of June, with respect to government announced measures in the face of the problems, debt sustainability, revenue drive, expenditure reduction, rationalization, and the rest of them? Where are we? Honorable quoted government size from the central government. presidency. Something, it may interest you to know the expansionary drive of other state-owned enterprises in terms of number of people they are absorbing. Even these are not profitable state-owned enterprises. You can talk about TOR. Look at the size, the growth in the size of the payroll. Look at GNPC. Look at Ghana Gas. For some of them, they have to provide land free once a day, probably on borrowed money.
Okay.
If we continue like this, we will be unique to expect a different outcome.
Let me get to Dr. Stephen Amoah. Thank you for joining us, Doc.
Thank you, boss.
Right. I'm looking at thankfully, and I'm happy we have you. Thankfully, the New Crusading Guide online, for example, reported this week about a seminar that you were one of the key speakers. And the heading of the story is Dr. Stephen Amoah discovers formula to raise Ghana from economic doldrums. The introduction says investment consultant and member of parliament for Inshiaso constituency in the Ashanti region, Dr. Stephen Amoah has combed through works of notable economic theorists and has discovered a most suitable formula that could raise Ghana out of its current economic doldrums. According to him, who is a member of the Finance Committee in Parliament, the challenges confronting the country now are that, one, the higher the risk, the higher expected returns in the investment principles of risk and return is being undermined continuously, unquote. And that his formula, which was published, which has been published and developed in 2020, integrates all the relevant variables and gives conditions and recommendations to enable banks and portfolio managers to reduce risk of industry collapse. Then you mention a few other things. Let me add this paragraph. It says, speaking at a day's seminar at the International Conference Center in Accra on Monday to a packed to capacity audience, both local and global economists themed identifying and redefining the economic fundamentals of developing economics, anomalies and challenges. The case of Ghana. Dr. Stephen Amoah assured that his organization, Financial Economic Seminar Ghana, is not ending with the seminar, but is going to work hard with stakeholder engagement, especially the Bank of Ghana, the banking industry, AGI, GUTA, the Finance Ministry, and other relevant policy bodies to see to ensuring that Ghana becomes a global icon. What exactly is this solution that you are proffering to get this country out of the current circumstances that we find ourselves? It's a global situation, except that we are worse.
Thank you very much, and my regards to Prof and Honorable Kujetu and our viewers this morning, and thank you for this opportunity. Something, I think I have quite a Herculean task this morning because professionally we have issues that probably I should speak with all the needed professional ethics, and also once I have my brother Kujetu making statements that also to me or which have impact or cut some sort of snare on my government's performance, definitely I can't go without doing the two, so just allow me, I beg, just respectfully. I think my work in summary was as a result of most of the issues that Prof raised. These are issues that for about 40 years, Prof quoted 1964, 1965, inflation rate from about 0.9, if I heard him correct, to about 26.4 or 26, just a year later, 26. And I also want to make this clear. I think publications from our media houses sometimes cannot entirely represent the meaning of what we say. We all know that. So let's be also careful that not all publications, out of a statement, a work done, that can be taken in its entirety. So if there's any other thing, anybody can ask me, then we'll go ahead and discuss, because I know the country in which we are. But going straight to the issue, you realize that from most of the things Prof said, Ghana, we have problems that for about 40 years, in my opinion, we keep on lamenting and trying to ponder over, trying to find solutions, and they linger on, and a small push elsewhere on somebody's market or in somebody's market, it puts us in a very turbulent situation. And not until all of us are honestly get involved in making sure that this has been a ritual, cultural thing we don't need. They are dysfunctional, and as a result, as a country, we need to stop politicization in a way at a point, which I think MPP and DC, we can all be faulted or whatever, and find everlasting solution to some of these. Some will not work out. And I think, one, my work came as a result of the fact that I realized that most governments on our market, many a time, or most of the times, borrow on our domestic market at a higher interest rate than even the private sector, which of course constitute the risky assets. Anybody can give whatever reason the person wants to give. If this is not the prevailing trails or issues or incidents we see in well-developed economies and efficient markets, ours seem to be anomalous, and we need to find solutions to it. Because I hear people are saying government is there, this one is happening. There could be genuine reason, but the fact is, what is happening is affecting us. And practically, what we need to know is that without any technical explanation, if government securities or assets that are classified risk-free are being seen to give investors higher returns, definitely banks automatically will prefer investing in government securities. As I'm talking to you now, between 57 and 70% of bank investment, whatever, goes into the government sector. Government does not actually create value chains, expand them, add segments that can employ people. That will mean that private sector will always have big issues in getting adequate funds to expand and produce what we need, aggregate demand on our market. So we will be forced at all times, doesn't matter who is in government, we'll be forced to import from outside. And once we import from outside something, we are going to have the ritual or ritually weak currencies that we have all the time. And that is why I say that any attempt, no matter who is in charge or who has the power or whatever, who wants to speak, it doesn't matter how good you are, short-term approaches to solving currency issues in any country, especially, characteristically, we have import-driven economy that in your studio today, and where in my house and everywhere, about 90% of things we use, we import. So you can never ever say that these are not issues. Two, the private sector that actually creates value chains cannot expand enough to employ people. So we are going to have virtually high rate of unemployment in our society. And these are the issues. And even to me, because the figures do not really fall within the principles of simple risk and return in investment, even valuation of banks that are integrated in our GDP computation can be challenged. So these are practical issues. I've spoken to almost all the banks guys in this country, the top ones, and they have accepted the fact that yes, what I'm saying is 100%. Of course, they have issues. The private sector has to position itself, and they are giving reasons why, which I understand. But if there are reasons or not, this is a serious issue we should go through. So it made me, as part of my work, try to simulate the existing models in the world. Capital asset pricing model by a gentleman called Sharp in 1964. And then an improved version was done, that was 1976, by a gentleman called Ross. And then later on, the two that were done were the optimal ones, seemed to be probably most acceptable ones. Two gentlemen, Hanan and Lian, that was 1993. And then 2015, Diamond did. They all improved upon what happened. Then I identified that the last one that was done did not integrate the fact that after deduction of reserve component of bank funds available, part goes into market and part goes into risky investment areas where risk premium was needed. Based on that, I developed a new model. But something coming back to all the issues we are talking about It's the fact that the things, especially my brother Okujeto is talking about, is very interesting. If we are talking about the fact that our minimum wage is probably too low comparatively, if we are not really getting staff to people that we are supposed to get and comparing that to other countries, we can't do that in isolation. In the first place, have we compared all relevant variables in terms of even the proper policies that are being rolled in our country, i.e. free school, i.e. LEAP, i.e. national health insurance policies, i.e. school feeding, and all those things?
So Dr. Amwa, the solution you proffer, and I take note of the fact that I've looked at the videos and how the International Conference Center was packed and the caliber of people that were there to listen to you and a couple of, experts from outside the country, and the debate it generated among the Guta, Professor Stephen Adair, and the rest of them. The main point is that because the country is import-driven, we will continue to be in this problem. Number two, that the banks, for example, are making supernormal profits from the state, and which is an anomaly that must be cured. So how do we get out of this stranglehold? How do we get out of it?
I think anything that I'm proposing now, just as I've had a proposed formula of model, it's not something I've worked on and I can say 100%, but of course I'm making recommendations. And I think how we can solve some of these problems cannot just sit there and say within a twinkle of an eye or 1 week or 1 day solve it. Just as most of the problems we are lamenting today, we cannot look at them today and say, hey, especially when we're going through. I think we need to work on how we manage our fiscal space, because governments are also forced to go for loans simply because we are operating a completely negative effective tax rate system. I mean monies outlaid from government to households against income or revenue of the government, excluding debt. It's negative all the time. Let's be very practical with these facts. Let's not deceive ourselves. Because I always say the something, I'm not holy, but there is God in whatever we do. Let's be very honest and take away, if we want to do politics, we can do proper comparative analysis. And I will tell you that then our government is even doing well. Because look, US today, since 1981, which is 41 years now, they're having the highest inflation rate, 18.4. Some parts in US, you are not even getting baby food. Some parts you don't get fertilizer. These are facts. I'm not saying because of the Ghana we should be happy. There's hardship in Ghana, we appreciate. But what I'm saying is that these problems needs holistic approach involving all stakeholders. And before we need to be realistic with how we manage even our fiscal space in terms of revenue we are generating, in terms of our outlays, and even discretionary spending arm of policy arm of the government too. Governments should work towards Ghana getting to single-digit interest rate by making sure that this anomaly is resolved. Because if risk-free assets, or even if governments, in our jurisdiction, we don't want to classify that which is against the global principle, which we cannot, is borrowing now as I'm talking to you now, T-bill rate is ranging between 20 and 24%. The bank's rate between 9 and 11, the industry average. Check the difference. Who will give his money to the private sector? So we need to take the bull by its horn, try to review our regulatory framework and policy framework, and also go through the market forces that determine some of these rates. There could be cartel, there could be probably, how do I put this word, like condoning system or something that probably we might not have known. But whatever it is something we need to solve.
My very final question to you, Steve, will be...
There you end me, or I have the chance to talk.
We have to end the show at a point. So my final question to you is, you are in government.
Like 1 minute or 2 minutes.
You are in government. You are on the finance committee. We know that you participate in discussions about, the economic management of the country somewhat. Fiscal space management is a government responsibility.
Sure.
So, who are you preaching to now?
If you ask this question, you are right, but it sounds like I'm doing a blame game. I'm not blaming anyone. This is a national issue. The problem we are having today, any honest person will tell you, it's not today's issue. It's been with us years. So I'm preaching to every stakeholder who has what it takes to come on board, and let us all make sure that, such as what I'm doing today to help, whether it's good or bad, everybody knows what I'm trying to do. Professor talking, Samuel Kujeto talking, you yourself, my brother from Imani coming to talk. Sometimes we get it wrong and right. We are all helping. Yes, if you tell me at present, it's on the government. And I don't think the government is sleeping. The fact is, if you have 40-year-old problems, if we sit there and our population size has grown from Nkrumah's time from about 5 million to about 31 million, if you have a situation where just close to 7% directly the formal sector pay taxes, and we're having negative effective tax rate, and these problems have been compounded for years, the government alone, of course, there are basic issues we need to check. One, our discretionary spending arm as a government. We should be able to now go there, even though the government said, oh, we cut down by 20%. Yes, well accepted, appreciated, but we can do more.
Okay.
We can do more by selecting the expenditure items, find out which of them have very weak correlation with our GDP, and throw them away and cut them. Look, let me give you this practical example.
Sorry, Dr. Stephen Amwa. Okay, please finish up in a minute.
But sometimes I have problems. I'm being professional, and there's also politics. So what do I do? Because my brother did politics. Anyway, because you want me to finish.
You have been speaking for over 30 minutes now. Do 1 minute and let's take a break.
Okay.
Yeah.
What I want to say to my brother Okujeto and those listening to us is that if we continue doing politics, then all the things, look at petroleum taxes. Let's find out whose regime we put most of them on. Well, most of them, if you want to really talk about that. So I am saying that let us shift our focus from politics,
all right,
and try to find solution as you're asking. But the fact of the matter is that today's problem, of course, we all know, just before the COVID, I'm not saying we're not having issues, where the situations like this. Let's find out. They were not like this. But most of the problems you're having today, in my opinion, are almost century-old problems that we need to sit down and redefine our corporate focus before we can find a very lasting solution to it.
Thank you so very much. Professor Bonkwe, I need just a minute from you to conclude, and then I'll go for a break and return to continue with the other discussions. So, Professor Bonkwe, in a minute, what will be your concluding comments?
Thank you very much, Samson. Clearly, we cannot throw our hands in the air. Government has to provide some kind of response. The more we delay this, I don't think that it will be in our best interest. Samson, the reason I'm saying so is that even before what we are talking about today, between 2009 and 2020, over 3.6 million Ghanaians were food insecure, did not have access to affordable food and nutrition or nutritious food at all times. And it's getting worse. More than half of the Ghanaian population are poor, living on less than $5.5 per the international poverty line. It doesn't have to get worse than this. So, and I believe that something, when we say so, we say government doesn't have fiscal space. Let's look at expenditure.
All right.
And that has to be comprehensive, And there has to be disclosure and greater transparency in that space.
All right. Thank you very
taxes?
much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Godfred Bokpin is Professor of Finance and Economist. He's at the University of Ghana. Dr. Stephen Amwa is MP in Shaiso and member Finance Committee of Parliament. We will break here and return shortly to begin with the discussion on the matters arising from the cathedral and questions of accounting. And Bright Simmons joins us. We'll be right back.